Good morning. So you're the lucky, brave group of people that are daring enough to come and listen to some work on spiritual bypassing. As you can see from the kind of opening talk there, come on in ladies, we're only just beginning. As you can see from the statement on the board here, I'm deliberately looking to chuck the cat amongst the pigeons here. So the talk is designed to be a provocation. Hi, you feel free to come on in if you want. It's going to be a deliberate provocation around spiritual practice, and so, but what I want this to be is something that we use for self-assessment, something that we use to just consider where we are within our spiritual practice, and for it to be a discussion as well. So don't be afraid to respond to the things that I say. Okay, so I kind of want to do that to you. So there's going to be a lot of pokes coming out of this talk because I want to see you react. I want to see what happens when this stuff goes into your minds and you respond to it. So don't feel you've got to hold it back. If you want to question me, if you want to challenge me, if you want to argue with me, you feel free, just go for it, okay? It's not going to be a problem with today's talk. Hi! Feel free to come on in if you're looking for a bit of spiritual bypassing work. Okay, so the term itself was first coined by psychologist John Wellwood in 1984. So this is not an original idea. You know, we've been looking at kind of spiritual bypassing work now for quite a few years. And this is where the use of spiritual practices and beliefs are there to avoid dealing with painful feelings, unresolved wounds, and developmental needs. Okay, so just let that settle in for a minute. The use of a spiritual practice to avoid painful feelings. Okay? Any of you relate to that? Can you understand how there have been times... Hi, come on in. That's okay. How you've actually used... Thank you.
I felt like we were in the dark.
Yeah.
And just walked in the dark. Sorry. It's good.
Perfect. Now we're all in the line. Don't be There's a nice line about being in the line a bit later on. So we're using this to avoid the stuff we don't want to look at. Okay? Any of you relating to that?
No.
Yes? No? Who is the no there? No, you don't use anything you do to avoid looking at the stuff you do. Great, we'll carry on with this then. We'll get there in a minute. And it's actually so common in our society, in our culture, you know, for the types of people that come to these events who are into the holistic living, it's so unnoticed that most of the time we don't even see it. And the habit of turning away from what causes us pain is so culturally embedded that we actually justify it by saying that there is a higher value in my spiritual practice, and it's a way of legitimizing the avoidance. So by saying that I'm looking at higher level stuff, I don't need to be bothered with all that other stuff, is a way of actually legitimizing our avoidance, and it's culturally accepted within this culture. And in fact, within our culture as a whole. You've only got to look at the acceptance of practices like caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, sugar, to know that actually we're in a culture that likes to avoid its pain and bury it. So, what is spiritual bypassing? How does it reveal itself? So, I'm going to stick these on the board, so again, I want to provoke you, alright? You're going to get a chance to have a think about some of these. It's okay that I want to provoke you, isn't it? You alright with that? Yeah? You don't mind the fact that I'm deliberately looking to kind of turf you out here and another 35 minutes or so going, what am I doing? Because that's kind of where we're going. So, really, it's the spiritual bypassing is the persistent shadow of spirituality. And it manifests in many forms. Have you all come across the idea of the shadow self before? Okay, so let's do a quick one on shadow self as well. So the shadow is the part of us we'd rather not be. Okay, so it's the part of us that we deny in ourselves but see vehemently within our environment. So I'm fine, it's everybody else kind of attitude. Where I am is great, but it's that guy, he's the problem. Okay, this is our shadow. It's the stuff that we seem to lack, but actually affects us when we see it in others. I'm not that, they are. Okay, I don't do that, they do. Okay, and the stuff that actually sets us off when we see it, this is our cultural shadow. And we have personal shadow that continues throughout our whole life. Okay? Anybody that does know shadow and has done shadow work, if you think you've done shadow work, then you don't get shadow. Because shadow is something that will appear repeatedly throughout your life. You won't just have it and then get rid of it. It doesn't work that way. We keep on encouraging shadow. But our spiritual bypassing can turn up in such ways as exaggerated dissociation and detachment. Okay, we also get it in emotional numbing and repression. Okay, we also get it in overemphasis on the positive. Which can also be seen as being negative about negativity.
That's just completely life, isn't it?
Say that again, sorry?
That's completely life.
What, being negative about
Overemphasis
negativity?
of positive, which is really negative about negativity, is what we all do all the time.
We do it a lot, but this is what I mean about it being such a cultural habit. It's not healthy, but it is a cultural habit. Definitely.
It's accepted that way.
Absolutely,
Yes.
and encouraged. Angerphobia. Any angerphobics in here? Anybody afraid of conflict with anger?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
great. Sure, we'll talk about that a bit. It's good. Okay, so we have blind and overly tolerant compassion. Okay, which then sits quite often with weak or let's get that the right way around. Weak or porous boundaries. Okay, and we can also have lopsided development. And that can also be horizontal development. Do you all understand what I mean by horizontal development? Okay, so it's where we do a bunch of the same shit and we never actually make any progress. So, for example, how many introduction courses have you been on to therapies and techniques? That's horizontal development, because the progress through the levels isn't taken care of. And without actual stage development, without moving up through levels of development, essentially what we do is we do horizontal development. And for the majority of the people that are doing holistic, new age, complementary stuff, you've all hit a level in your development called, oh god, the words just jumped out of my head. It's pluralistic thinking. So we're at a level where we're doing pluralism, where everything is equal, we all have rights, we should all listen to each other, everything is good, but my way's the best. Okay, so it's nice working pluralism there. Okay, so debilitating judgment, which is good. And this is of our own shadow side. And also, this is my favourite. And again, these are my favourites, and these are the things I'm interested in because I did it. Okay, I do it. All right, I'm going to be the first to own that spiritual bypass. Okay, and this is a delusion at having arrived at a higher level. Okay, that's one of my favourites. This is the. I've taken my master's course now, so that's all right. I've arrived. Don't work out that way, does it? All right. Anything in there that kind of jumps out at you? Anything in there that makes you think, okay, I can put my hand up to that. I know that I go there. Thank you. Owned. Yeah, exactly. You know, there's so many things in there. So these are all forms of spiritual bypassing.
I think the horizontal development one may be that sometimes, yes, we're guilty of taking first steps into something and not progressing, but maybe that's because when we've taken the first step, we find that isn't for us at that time.
Absolutely.
So we don't want to progress with that.
Sure.
We
Yeah.
want to do something else.
So the question is why? What does the progression bring that you want to avoid?
I don't think it's about avoidance always. I think it's about where you are at that time.
Of course.
Whether it's right for you at that time.
Of course.
And the taster might feel, oh yeah, this could be something I need now. So you go to the taster, whatever that is, and think, no,
It's not.
it really wasn't what I thought it was.
Sure.
So perhaps not for me.
And you know, both camps exist there. So A, beautifully bypassed. You know, to be able to deny that something has value or relevance for you. But also you're right, that sometimes it's not the approach that we need to be able to deal with the thing that we're looking to deal with.
Or it's not the right time.
Yeah, sure.
Timing's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, no. Because at the same time, there's never a good time to deal with bad shit. There is never a good time to deal with bad shit. We are, you know, it's there. If it's present and it comes up, we just need to get our feet in and get on with it. You know, because it's still there. And the problem with a lot of the bypassing stuff is it's still carrying on. And the problem with a lot of the shadow stuff is it still has energy and it still carries on, even if you think you're not ready to deal with it. So you're already giving it energy because you've separated off this part of yourself and you're going, well, I haven't got time for that, it's not the right time, it's not the right place, I can't find the right teacher. It's still a denial of the thing that you're not dealing with, you know, for whatever reason. So it's always an interesting balancing act. And there's a difference between being able to find that healthy, you know, is this just not the right approach for me? Being able to honestly go, am I just afraid of looking at the thing that I don't want to look at? Is this so painful to me on some level that I will find any reason not to do it, or I'll put it off for as long as possible? And that is always a very, very difficult question to answer really honestly. You know, and again, you know, I'll hold my hand up, I've done it. So, which is part of why I'm here. So again, a lot of the time when we're immersed in spiritual bypassing, we like the light but not the heat. So we enjoy the benevolence of the spiritual glow, but we don't actually like it to burn into us, and we don't like to get into the bit that we're trying to get away from. It's an interesting one, and there's this thing that we'll see later on about thinking that up here is somehow better than down here. Okay, but that's fallacies about spirit, and we'll go into some of that in a minute.
Well, down here is your shadow, isn't it?
No,
Oh, thank you.
no. The shadow is actually just disowned, so it's always outside of ourselves. Down here, this is your reproductive stuff.
Oh, I didn't
Sure. But actually, anything less spiritual about this to this?
Depends on the circumstances.
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes this is far less spiritual than this. Okay? And again, it's an important part of us to acknowledge because we deny it a lot. You know, we have this belief that when we transcend our body that we're in a better place. But that can also be a big case of spiritual bypassing. Okay? So we have to understand it. You know, if we don't feel that the body, physicality, embodiment of anything we're doing is as valuable and as spiritual as transcendent meditation, then again we've got spirit wrong. Okay? But it's, you know, this is strong stuff as well. You know, a lot of people don't like to hear this stuff at all because it means that they have to engage with where they are. And that is also in itself a challenging stuff. You're always welcome to come in and join us if you're not sure what you're doing. So, and in this, we'd usually like to theorise about the frontiers of consciousness rather than go there. We tend to suppress the fire rather than breathing it more alive. We espouse the ideal of unconditional love, but we don't allow it, we don't permit it to show up in its more challenging dimensions. So again, from a spiritual point of view, anger, okay, not okay?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Yeah,
If
sure.
you know, then you can destroy your body and
Exactly.
So you have to let it out and let it go.
Yeah, sure.
That's what I will try to do anyway.
Yeah, sure.
I say try to do.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Me too. You know, there are days when I get it right on the nail, and there are other days where it buries me
You
in
couldn't
my
be more
pile.
wrong if you
Yeah,
tried,
sure.
yeah.
Exactly. Can I get it out healthily? No. You know, and that's the way it is. And we've got to recognise that's part of the human condition. You know, we'll get onto some of that in a minute. You know, because to get into some of this stuff would seem too scary, too out of control. It brings to the surface that which we have long disowned or suppressed. And if your body is in any way out of condition, then you have disowned and suppressed. I'll put that straight in there without any hesitation. Especially if you're over about 30, okay? And your body is holding on to stuff, aches, pains, weight, toxicity, any way you want to describe it, then you are in some way denying and suppressing stuff that you're not allowed to process through. And again, it's not that you're wrong, okay? This is important. This is not about being right or wrong. This is about the way the cultural pattern teaches us to be. And so all we do is follow it, okay? Hi! You can come on in as well if you like. So, any spiritual path, Eastern or Western, that doesn't deal in real depth with psychological issues and deal with these in more than just a spiritual sense is setting people up for an abundance of spiritual bypassing. Okay, so when we put stuff down to karma, when we say spirit will take care of it, it's something from another life, all of these are ways of denying where we are in our human condition right now. Okay, and again, strong stuff, because to actually sit there and own that stuff and go, do you know what, this is who and where I am right now, and it's horrid, you know, it's messy, it's disturbing, that is difficult stuff for us. You know, it does, it challenges us. It takes us into places that we don't feel comfortable. And psychotherapy is often viewed as an inferior or a lesser undertaking relative to what we're being told are higher seeming spiritual activities. You know, and that in itself is an interesting question. So if we can't engage with the psyche, and when you see any therapist or any practitioner where you've got an issue in your body, if they can't recognise that there are, not that there could be, but there are psychotherapeutic issues that are involved in where you are, then they're missing a trick. Okay? Because one of the things that we don't really understand about ourselves, that we don't fully accept, is we have what's known as centaur awareness. So a centaur is a mythical creature, is a man's body, well, a man and a horse's body, right? No, it's a centaur. Okay, the centaur doesn't see itself as anything other than the centaur. It sees no separation between its above and its below. Okay, so most of the time we talk about our headquarters, our driver, our personality, our persona, and our body. It does this. It's like this. We dissociate ourselves from that, but actually there is no separation. And in fact, because our mind is subjective and our body is objective, so I can point to your brain, I can point to your organs, I can point to limbs, I can even point to meridians and chakras. They have a location in time and space, so they are objective. Others can view them. Your mind is completely subjective. I can't point to it. Okay? I can point to your brain, but I can't point to your mind. So the subjective reality that we experience is always carrying a correlate in its objective partner. So there is never a separation between body and mind. So when your body is holding stuff, pain, tension, weight, toxicity, anything you want to go there with, cancer, MS, anything you want, it's because there is a correlate in the mind. It can't not be. And the only exception to that in order of how it's set up is trauma that's done to the physical body. So if we're talking about car crashes or physical trauma that includes surgery, then it's the body that starts the mind, but the mind will still end up with a correlate. You can't have one without the other. It is actually impossible. You try and tell me any time you've been able to experience your mind or your body without the other one being present. It doesn't really happen. So if a teacher doesn't encourage you to see the value of psychotherapy, then students often don't engage. And this often leaves them stuck with psycho-emotional issues, which can be traumatic or otherwise. And You know, we've seen that over the past kind of 40, 50 years with a lot of spiritual teachers coming out of the East, coming into the West, teaching us all kinds of practices, and yet they'll tell you you don't need anything else. They tell you you don't need any psychotherapy, they don't just do the techniques that we tell you. And yet at some point in their career they usually have problems with sex, money, you know, all sorts of other stuff, because their lower energies were also marginalised in spiritual bypassing. So this is not something that's just held to us as a culture, it happens a lot. So spiritual bypassing is also occupied by the idea of oneness, unity, you know, this undifferentiated kind of wholeness that we see between us and everything else. But this generally reinforces fragmentation. So there's a big difference between the pre-personal childhood a-dualism, where we don't see that there's us and other. Then we go through a series of dualistic stages in our lives where there is us and other, subject and object. And then if our practice takes us that far, we move into non-dualism, which is where subject and object, the unmanifest and the manifest, appear simultaneously, and we experience the two simultaneously. This is rare in our culture. Okay? So a lot of people that think they've got to that point haven't got to that point. And you can find it out quite easily just by talking to them. So many negative expressions are not allowed out within spiritual bypassing. So to be angry, to be fearful, to be doubtful, these are all seen as things that we need to change and get rid of, and they're not spiritual and they're not healthy for us, which to a degree is true, but how and why is there? You know, whatever experience you are experiencing is what you're experiencing. We don't need to make any of you wrong about that. You know, this is not a good or a bad emotion. Happiness is not good in comparison to anger's badness. You know, that's not how it works. Emotions are just emotions. They're an experiential aspect of our system, but it's what we do with them that counts. You know, I've seen happy people be abusive. I've seen angry people be kind and considerate. You know, this is not something that's limited to the emotion, and we need to recognise the difference between the emotion and the action that we take in response to the emotion, because it's ours. You know, let's own it, let's take it. So body sensations are generally not explored. You know? So we tend to kind of look at what's down there as far less spiritual or less valuable than what happens up here. Okay? So if you can't make a spiritual connection in your sex, in your defecation, in your digestion, then again you're missing what spirit is. And you've got a limited idea of what it is. And our neglect of this real wholeness and full acceptance of ourselves can often lead to behaving like animals too long in cages when they're let out. And this can be in one of two ways. First of all, we just go fucking mental, and we lose it, and we get out and we binge, and you know, we get crackers, and we eating stuff, you know, it's almost harmful in its behaviour, drinking, you know, wildness within ourselves, or we just don't know what to do. We come out dead. You know, do I want to do that? I'm not sure. What do you want to do? I'm not sure. What do you want to do? I don't know. Should we try it? Maybe. You know, so there's all this kind of like, I've been in this prison too long, so I don't really know what to do with myself. You know, because we've lost the ability to embody and feel our bodies. You know, and that's such a big key for us. You know, this is the vehicle. You know, I am the vehicle. You know, how much do you feel yourself? You know, how much do you know the sensations in your body? What's it like? You're really inspired there, aren't you? So come on, come on, join in, give it a pat, give it a slap. Come on, feel it. What's it like? You know?
Tapping.
Look at the difference in the energy that starts to come into you when you start doing that. You're bringing yourself into your body. You know, we talk a lot about people lacking grounding, and there's a lot of different ways of looking at grounding, but embodied's part of it. You know, every mouthful of food I have, every drink I have, every touch I have, I want that to be nourishing and vital and energetic and something that makes me go, oh, life! You know, I feel it in my bones all the time. But, you know, when we're disconnected from this body, we just don't get that. We don't feel it. You're with me so far? So the benefits of spiritual bypassing often look really good. Okay? So it's the promise of freedom from life's fuss and fury. You know, who wouldn't want that? Yeah, you come and do this practice and everything's going to be great. You're going to be so happy, you're going to feel better, no pain, no stress, no worries. Great, bullshit. Yeah? But the serenity and detachment is often more like a metaphysical value. Okay? Especially for those who have made too much out of looking and being positive. You know, and this is a really interesting space to go into as well. So how much are we... You know, I'm a big advocate for constructively framing things. So I like to look at what we can do with a thing. But it's important to me that we don't deny it. How are you feeling today? Fucking shit. Great, now what do you want to do with that? You know, there's nothing wrong with the acknowledgement of where I am. The question is, what am I going to do with it? You know? But I first have to own it. I first have to see it, be it, allow it. So a lack of grounding or a lack of embodied experience are often signs of spiritual bypassing taking place. So again, how does it feel? What's going on inside? Exactly. You know? And doesn't it immediately change you? You know, if you're struggling with something, put on your liveliest, funkiest piece of music and feel your body until you're with it. And then go, right, now what do we need? You know, get back into the body, feel it, experience it, know it. We're too often off up here, oh, I don't know what I want. But that's because you're not in the thing that wants a thing. You know, this is where desire is. You know, it's not somewhere else, and it's not a bad thing either. So we can fall into premature forgiveness, which really is poor boundaries and allowance. You know, we just allow people to get away with things, to do things, to be things, because we're not prepared to challenge that. We're not prepared to reinforce our boundaries and go, that's not okay. You know, that affects me in a way that I'm not happy with. And yes, there has to be a degree of responsibility in that as well. I've got to look first of all about whether or not, how am I provoking that? Am I the one who kind of suddenly chucked the thing and then went, why are you angry at me? You know, and it's amazing how often we do things like that and actually set people up to provoke us back in a certain way, just so we can give them shit. We get emotional dissociation. You know, no, I'm not upset, I'm not angry, I'm fine, it's all alright. How are you doing today? I'm fine. We can often confuse anger with aggression and ill will. So, aggression is what we do with anger most of the time. But anger is completely acceptable to express if it's done cleanly. So without blame, without bias, and with ownership. I am angry right now. Okay? Am I angry right now? I'm alright right now. You're good. Am I energized? Definitely. Can that sometimes be confused with anger? Definitely. You know, animation, vitality, passion, you know, these are some of the other sides of anger that we get. And again, we're often afraid of it, understandably so.
And numbing.
Sure, yeah. And we tend to numb ourselves away from it. You know, this is the thing, we don't want to feel because, you know, some of this stuff hurts. You know, it hurts. You know, I get pain when I experience that thing. It's not good, but you know, okay, that's where we are. Let's not worry about it. So all of this stuff actually leaves us disempowered and with weak boundaries, and that's not good for us. You know, we say yes to things when really what we want to do is go, no, okay. You know, that's not for me. I don't want to do that. One of my favourite words, and it's one of the few words I know in Spanish, is obligato. Which is to be obligated. It's a thank you, but it's also to be obligated to. You know, and we often confuse our some of our stuff for an obligation. So rather than creating gratitude within people, we often create obligation. So again, this is another form of dissociation, where actually we do a thing because we want a thing. You know,
What about responsibility though then?
yeah, sure. Okay, tell me more.
Well, just that as a parent, you have or feel responsibility. You might not be doing what you want to do,
Sure.
but just accepting responsibility
Yes.
for other people might not be accepting responsibility for ourselves.
Sure. And the first point of that has to be that we have to accept responsibility for our choices. So as soon as you decide to have children, and again, obviously there are circumstances where that isn't always the way it happens, but when we decide to have children, we've actually made a choice and we have to be responsible for it. And the choice is, I'm going to sacrifice myself for at least 20 years and raise this other person.
You're not old enough to realise it's not 20 years, it's more like an awful lot more, isn't it, ladies? 50 and
I'm just a savage, and they'd be out the door at 20 if they were. So.
They're never out the door at 20.
Yeah, sure. But also look at the choice that comes back with that. Okay? Now, if you spoke to my mum about this, it might be a different answer, because she conferred onto us a sense of responsibility that was different. So, before 20 I was out the door, and I didn't really ever ask for anything
Well,
again.
did you want to be out the door at 20?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But that's also because I was encouraged to have a spirit of adventure. Go and see the world. This is only one little bit. Don't sit here with me in comfort. Get out there. Do life. Because that's what we're here for. We're a vehicle. We're here to enjoy it. So, we get the overdone niceness of spiritual bypassing as well, which separates us from emotional depth and authenticity. And it's characteristic often of underlying grief, which is mostly unspoken, untouched and unacknowledged. So we're just polite with everybody, we're just nice about stuff. Yeah, it's all okay. Having a bit of a tricky day, but I'm alright. Really? No, fucking awful. Oh God, all this stuff is in there. We're afraid to let it all out. Spiritual bypassing distances us from our pain and our difficult personal issues, but also from authentic spirituality, leaving us in a metaphysical limbo. A zone of exaggerated gentleness, niceness and superficiality. Okay? And again, I'm going to keep on drawing some of this stuff back to sex for a good reason. Okay? Because it's one of the things that is so often separated away from spirituality that it's not done healthily. Okay? But we can be passionate and vigorous and tough in our sex. And it doesn't mean that A, we're any less spiritual or B, any less loving. Okay? And this is our approach to life. We can be strong. The yang side of big heart, of loving compassion, is discerning. It's the cut through. It's the thing that still takes no nonsense. It's not going to listen to the kind of rubbish that's coming out. It's not going to let you bullshit me. It's going to be the one that says, hey, what's going on here? Why are we getting this expression? Let's have something genuine coming out, rather than the kind of nicey, sweetie, I was in lovely and light, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So how many places do you tell yourself that you should or should not be doing meditation, lovingness, openness, anger, doubt and punishment? We flee our darker and less spiritual emotions, impulses and intentions and remain trapped in the practices that are supposed to liberate us. So how often are we using our Reiki treatment or our meditation or anything else we do as a way of getting away? We really, we want to feel nice, soft, gentle, cozy, warm, we're embedded into that place, lovely. But how often are we prepared to actually get into some deep shit? And really look at the stuff, look somebody in the eye, cry with them, acknowledge you hurt me, I hurt you. I'll own the fact that I did that, and they'll own the fact that they did that, and we can go, right, okay, great, now what do you want to do? Do it better, great, let's move on. So without that real acknowledgement of the hurt, the pain, of the darkness and the shit, we just don't get there. And to be honest as well, part of the reason why I'm doing this talk is because for me it is now an object. I recognise myself as having been in these places. I do spiritual bypassing. Okay, I'll own it straight up. And it's changed my relationships to get to this point. Because now, my partner can say to me, that was just not fucking okay for me. And she'll be harder than that, and she does it, I tell you. And instead of feeling like I would have done years ago, like, kind of collapsing into this needy victim, instead of kind of going into that place, I'll go, all right, fair enough. This is where I spotted me doing that. And she'll be like, actually, it started a bit before that, and came out here. Okay, sure. I'll take that too, that's okay. And then we're in an honest place then, because we're not lying to each other, we can be open. And there's a difference between openness and full disclosure as well, so let's just be clear about that. Because sometimes, and I've seen it happen a lot in spiritual circles, full disclosure is used as a punishment and as a cudgel. So I've seen couples and partners and friends and people relating to each other use full disclosure as a way of blaming and hitting and beating each other abusively, rather than just being able to be honest about stuff. So to move through spiritual bypassing, we have to learn to name our pain and relate to it rather than from it. So there's no longer shadow involved. We have to own those bits that we need to look at. And allow healthy shame from recognising we've been hiding our pain in our practice. And part of this as well, we have to be careful because there's a middle ground where for some people that have done a bit of work on shadow and a bit of work on their darker sides, they'll go, "You're projecting that on me." Am I? Are you sure? You know, because to project something onto somebody, I've got to tell them, or I've got to believe that I don't already have it. You know, so the key part of a projection is the fact that A, it affects me, and B, I believe I am free of that. So as soon as somebody says to me, "You're projecting that on me," I say, "How do you know? Do you think that that's not you?" "Yeah." "Is it affecting you?" "Yeah." "Well, you're projecting on me." So we can get into a good game with that if we're not careful. When we deny our shadow and our negative emotions, which we do almost violently, we're missing out on this chance we have for authentic relationship and authentic connection with ourselves. Because let's face it, if you haven't already worked out there isn't anybody else, okay, it's just you in your head and a bunch of stuff, okay? So the world is creating itself around you. So every conversation, every relationship, everything that happens around you is partly because of how you choose to be with it. So by not denying our shadow, we get into a much healthier space. And some of this comes from investing in the idea that if we were more spiritual, we would be more valuable. You know, we think that there is a higher value. So spiritual bypassing keeps us stuck into this concept of higher value ideals, believing that level 5 or level 7 has more value and is better than level 2 or 3. And therefore we end up with a little bit of a chip on our shoulder. You're at level 2, aren't you? Level 5. Okay. So, and that in itself is not healthy. You know, because you might have started at level 4, they might have started at level 1. You don't know what the progression is, what the change is, what the transformation is, what the dedication is, what the work is to get from that place to that place. And besides, it doesn't matter what level anybody's at, you're all dying at the end of it, okay? And at the end of it, it doesn't matter what level you are, you're dead, okay? You're going back into the cosmic suit, and it's going to accept you with full love regardless of what you've done. Okay? So don't get levelist with people. You know, look at the way you look at somebody's superiority. And again, hands up, I've done it. You know, I can remember that before I started teaching kinesiology, it's kind of like if I wanted to see a kinesiologist, I would say, "What level are you at? Where are you at?" "I'm at level 9. So, "Are you going 7? Are you? Okay, sure. Well, I can't have work with you." And I wouldn't let myself be worked on by anybody that to me seemed less qualified and less experienced than me, until I started teaching. And then I was in a situation where complete novices who'd done no kinesiology, we'd have odd numbers in a class, so I had to get on the couch and let them work on me. Did they shift stuff on me and find stuff in me? Hell yeah! You know, and that just opened up this beauty for me that actually everybody has a gift to share with you. Everybody has something that they can do to enhance your life if you are open to it. You know? So we've got to watch out on this levelling. And also we can be demonstrating the higher aspirations, have all the trappings, see my crystal, it's beautiful, and but the lower aspects or the lower levels of ourselves are just deteriorating. So, you know, your crystals look great, tie-dye looks great, I love the way you've got a feather in your hair, but how's your back doing? You know, how are your bowels doing? You know, how's your sex life? You know, and we get people that are going, "Oh, I don't do it." So why not? Look up the crystal, it's fine. And the transcendence of our personal history seems to take precedence over being intimate with it. You know, we don't truly get into the stuff that we do. It doesn't really help us in the way we think, because all we're doing is kind of suppressing all this other stuff And at every level you go to, this is part of integral theory, every level you go to, there are going to be shadows that pop up, there are going to be difficulties that pop up, there are going to be challenges that pop up, and they cannot be solved by the level that you're in. Only by transcending will you find the solution. And that accounts for level 1 all the way up to level 10. So one of the things I know about my shadow is the fact that every time I make a developmental jump, I'm going to get a new shadow. So I might as well just expect it and look forward to it and deal with it. Because it doesn't matter, I'll encounter new things. It's a bit like going to a different country, a country you've never been to before. There's stuff that you'll see and stuff that you'll taste and stuff that you'll do that you have to accommodate with. And some of it you'll reject and some of it you'll accept. That's all that life is, it's this journey. But all that transcendence of personal history over the intimacy keeps it all undigested and unintegrated, and therefore very much present regardless of our desire or apparent skill to rise above it, because we're still not facing it. We value the transpersonal over the personal, and it keeps us locked from healthy differentiation into unhealthy dissociation. So there's a difference between being able to recognise where I've been in the past and me denying that it's, I was never like that, no problem. And it happens a lot. This is not an issue for me. And we must approach our numbness and our desire for numbness carefully and cease to do that. So we must turn towards our painful, disfigured, unwanted aspects of ourselves and cultivate as much intimacy as possible with them. So we relate from it, not to it. And it would be an understatement to say this is a challenging journey that requires nothing less than the very deepest vulnerability. Despite the undeniable calming and relaxing effects of meditation practices that sedate the mind, this can also be detrimental. It's not always good to feel calm and more relaxed, particularly when it doesn't coexist with discernment and insight. We need to be angry about stuff. We need to be upset about stuff. We need to actually look at the reaction we have to something. Otherwise, again, our boundaries are not clear, and those can be then manipulated and pushed through by people who are stronger. And as long as we're turning away from our pain in our practice, whatever that is, whatever level it is, then we're spiritual bypassing on one level or another. And our unwillingness or inability to enter such vulnerability, to authentically connect with our childlike aspects of innocence, wonder, openness, to feel genuine compassion for and connection with the child in us, especially when that child's been hurt or traumatised, it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for us to truly touch or heartfully connect with the child and others as well. So what spiritual bypassing would have us rise above is precisely what we need to enter, and enter as deeply with as little self-numbing as possible. It's essential to see through whatever practices we have, spiritual or otherwise, and tranquilise rather than illuminate, tranquilise rather than illuminate and awake us. And if we have any investment in being numb, we may be drawn to meditative or spiritual practices that keep us distant from our pain. And it's not something to eradicate the spiritual bypassing, but something to outgrow. Treat it as such. Recognise that real spirituality is not an escape, but an arrival. So imagine a place with no pain, no judgment, no nasty moral dilemmas, a place where whatever happens is just karma, just the perfection of being unfolding as it must. And imagine not just visiting there or dreaming of such being, but actually dwelling there. This is the narcotic promise of spiritual bypassing. Okay? And this dream is not to fulfill, but one to awaken from. So how do we do that? In every way that we always have, but with the recognition that running away from it is not the key. Get into the pain. So, before I finish, I am just about to finish. Some of the things that I do that contribute towards this practice. First of all, every second Tuesday of the month at Centre for Integral Health, we do Zen meditation, Zen voices. So this is a Zen practice where we spend time sitting, and then we spend time doing voice dialoguing, looking at those disowned parts of ourselves. I also do shadow workshops. So we deliberately look at your shadow, wake it up, talk to it, deal with it. Are they messy? Sometimes. also do Qigong days as well. So especially do 5-element days, where we do a practice specific to the season, but also the emotions that go with it. So we've got a day coming up on the 25th of November, looking at our kidney energy for winter, and that's around fear and anxiety. So we do practices that allow us to get into the body and deeply feel that energy within our body, and then transform it and release it. So we have to acknowledge it, own it, be with it first of all, and then we can let it go. Plus all the other therapeutic stuff I do, kinesiology, access bars, burn technique, all the other tools that I have for sitting and talking with you and being with you and allowing this stuff to come through. So if any of that seems exciting, please make sure you take some of my literature on your way out. So we've got my flyer, centre flyer, and an events flyer for our centre. And if you have any questions, then I'll hang around for about 5 minutes or so after the talk, so we can do that. But you're welcome to come and see me at my stand in the big room, just down the bottom there, right up on stage. I'll be waving and being frantic all day. So thank you very much for listening, I really appreciate that. I hope you enjoyed the talk and spiritual bypassing.